Hello, good evening, all the participants. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a very interesting session on supporting generational employees. And today, the speaker for the session who's with us is an ACCA member. Her name is Mariam Riza, and she is a generational strategist slash expert. And if most of you would remember, she has done sessions for us in the past on the new generation, and how to tackle this generation in the workplace. So a very capable, skilled, and knowledgeable panelist with us today. The the particular aspect that she's going to bring into our conversation today is the COVID-19 crisis, and how does that affect supporting generational employees. Thank you all very much for joining us. There was a lot of enthusiasm in joining this particular webinar, and we have about 400 individuals willing to get onto this webinar and hearing this session live. I'll just do a bit of housekeeping, after which I will hand over to Mariam. First of all, I would like to mention my colleague Ruchira from our Sri Lanka office, who has been instrumental in organizing these webinars. Thank you very much, Ruchira, and if you can unmute yourself and say hello to everyone.
Hi Harun, and hello everybody from Sri Lanka. I hope there is a big group joining us today from Sri Lanka and also from the entire MESA region. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ruchira, and thank you for all your support. Yes, this is a regional webinar, which means there are people joining in from Middle East, from all 11 countries in the Middle East, from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, as well as from Sri Lanka. But the one common thing amongst all participants is going to be they're all ACCA members. So that's a good thing. ACCA is continuously looking at delivering more value to its members in this situation of crisis. We are trying to help members stay focused, stay relevant, and continue to add value to their organizations. So very quickly, the session has some poll questions, and when the time comes, you'll see the poll questions on your screen. We will make relevant announcements at that time. Secondly, you may be able to ask questions by typing them in the questions dialog box. Please note you should be seeing two dialog boxes. One is the chat dialog box, the other one is questions. Please type in all your questions in the questions dialog box. However, to make the session more interactive, we will from time to time allow some attendees to be unmuted. So if you want to verbalize your question, if you want to ask it yourself rather than typing it in, even that will be a possibility. And we will make that announcement. We will ask you to raise hands, and then in a specific order, we will give an opportunity to certain attendees to ask questions verbally as well. This is going to be a CPD session, 1 hour duration, question and answers. If there are too many questions, we will probably take another 10-15 minutes, and that's something that Mariam has already agreed. Before I hand over to Mariam, there is the handout, that you can see on the screen. Right now, Mariam is sharing her screen, but the slide deck is also available as a handout for all the participants to be able to download. So Mariam has allowed all the participants to download these slides and to refer to them afterwards as well. Once again, thank you all very much for joining in. Hope this is going to be a very interactive session. Mariam, handing over to you, and I'm going on mute, and I'm switching off my camera also.
Hi everybody, welcome to ACCA webinar on supporting your generational employees in the COVID-19 crisis. I'd like to first take a few minutes to thank ACCA because of specifically the MESA region, Harun from Pakistan, Ruchira and Ilusha from Sri Lanka, because I am a regular face on all of your region's webinars because of the work that they do behind the scenes to develop us accountants for the challenges of the future. So I am excited as a member to be able to learn so much, to be able to provide, but also to meet you and also add value to the CPD session and building our accounting profession in general. So thank you, Harun and Ruchira and Anusha as well. So to kick off this session, the COVID-19 crisis has been an extremely unfortunate and unprecedented time. It is a once in a 80 to 100 year cycle. And if you are feeling stressed, anxious, and worried about not just your personal life, but also your organization in general, it's perfectly normal. And that is why organizations like your companies, ACCA, and myself are trying to help you deal with that in little baby steps. And today's session is about trying to walk you through how do you manage your generational employees. Now, this could mean if you are part of a team, leading a team, or a manager, how do you deal with all of the other employees or your team members? But these practices also help you understand your general stakeholders in general as well. So sometimes you might deal with an older colleague or a younger intern, and these strategies would help you deal with this generation and basically just help you walk through the COVID-19 crisis. But most importantly, we're here to help. And do feel free to put comments in the chat box and also ask questions sporadically as we filter through them and respond to your questions. So, what are we going to be talking about today? We'll be first talking about the multi-generational workforce. What this means is all of the generations in your workforce will be talking about what mix is there. And then we'll be talking about what do employees want. Now, this is from a generalistic point of view. What do we all want in general? And even though this session is about segmenting people into generations, it's very important to realize that we're all very similar and we all have very similar values, needs. We all need to fill our tummies. We all need to go and educate our children, so on and so forth. But there are small differences between the generations. And in today's conversation, I will be unfortunately generalizing quite a bit. And I want you to remember the most critical thing is your generation or the person in front of you will be different. So even if it is an older gentleman, even though I say they are like this, always look at the person in front of you and make determinations about who that person is. So don't stick to stereotypes. But what I'm trying to give you an understanding of a general understanding of how this generation works or why they work like that so that you're able to understand them better. So don't go and deal with the older gentleman saying, oh, Mariam said this, I'm going to treat the person differently. No. Look at the situation and determine if this gentleman is like that or not, and make the way you react to that person situational, right? And then we'll be moving to the different generations. Here we'll be talking about how the different generations work and think, why their needs differ. So, for example, in a crisis, when say an older person loses a job versus a younger person loses a job, the way they approach it is going to be different because they come at it from different socio-economic standpoints. That means, do they have savings in their bank account? Do they have to pay off a mortgage? Are they studying for a double MBA? Different circumstances. And then fundamentally, then how to support them. And I will leave you with a summary of action blocks. In case all of the information at the top is too much, we're going to summarize that into a really nice action blocks for you to take away for your work and your home. So, let's get into it. But before we do that, a little bit about me. Why are you listening to me? Why do you have to listen to me for an hour? Like, oh, you could be doing so much more than listen to me. That's because I've done this for so many years. I am what you call a human capital strategist. What that means is it's about not human resources, is about making sure that people's values are optimized in an organization. With human capital, it's about looking at the way people work and then trying to make their lives better, trying to not extract value. It's like a hard concept. It's about trying to make their work life better. And that's what I do, but predominantly in the generational space. So I look at the generations and I make recommendations to organizations in terms of how to convert, to communicate, and bring out value within these generations. And that's why you're listening to me. Some of the great organizations that I've worked with are down here. ACCA is a big one, especially because I am a member, but also because of the team has always been very supportive. And whenever there's a crisis, they're the first to go, which I'm really thankful for. And that's a little bit about me. Enough about me, enough bragging. Okay, so now the multi-generational workforce. It's a big word. What it means is multi means many generations. So many generations in your workforce. So we have a lot of people decide what a generation is based on the years, right? So they look at which year you're born and say, oh, I'm born in, say, 19 blah, 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 I'm a millennial, or I'm a baby boomer, or I'm a Gen Z. And that's how it helps people. When you have categories like this, it helps people categorize the information. So the way the brain works is when you're able to segment and categorize data, you're able to analyze it much faster because you are trying to prevent cognitive overload. And that's why you have years. But I'm not a very big fan of the years because I truly believe that in order to understand the generations, you have to understand why they act like that. But just for the purpose of this conversation, just so that you know, baby boomers are known to be born from 1946 to 1964, Gen X 1965 to 1979, Millennials 1980 to 95, Gen Z 96 to 2010. Why have I highlighted in purple? A, it's my favorite color, but also because these are the 4 generations in your workplace today. This is important because this composition is what we'll be talking about later on as well. So for your information, these 4 generations are critical for you to understand because one day you're talking to an intern who's a Gen Z, and then you're also talking to your audit partner who may be a baby boomer, and maybe your client is a Gen X, and that is why these definitions are important to you. But I told you, I'm not a big fan of the dates. Why? Because I look at the generations based on what life experiences they went through, what carved out who they are as people, what made them who they are in their early education, in their middle age, and also in the later stage in their life. This is what's important because when you sort of roughly throw a stereotype on somebody, it's wrong. Because I could be born in for example, I could be born in 1980, somebody's born in 1979. Are we that different? No, because it's only 1 year, which is why these numbers are not exactly composite or absolute figures, but try to understand where that person came from. Remember I talked to you about that older gentleman? What makes him think? Why does he think like that? What did he go through as a child for him to be like that? Is how I define the generations. Let me give you an example. So we all know that the baby boomers are born in 1946. So these are the post-war baby boomers, post-war, so the big World War II. After the World War ended, the baby boomers were born, and so therefore they had a very different period in which a lot of things, there was no systems in place. It was post-war, right? So there were no buildings basically, and it was desolate and there was destruction. So they had to build everything up, and so therefore they were they had perhaps a very rough early life in the beginning of their life. Now, when you look at the way Western media portrays a lot of the research, because it's bent on Western research, it very rarely covers an Asian or Eastern angle. And then so I look at baby boomers in Asia, specifically in Southeast Asia and South Asia, as the independence babies. So these are all post-independence babies. So think of these babies who are just coming off of the Indian or the Pakistan independence or the Sri Lanka independence. We also have a Malaysian here with us in the audience. These are independence babies. So as the British left, they had to somehow work with building systems again. They had to work with building companies again. And so therefore the early stage was quite rough. And that is why they are more cost effective. They are more self-sufficient. They're very rigid in the way they do things. They're like, yes, let's do this. We can do it. And that's what your baby boomers are, because when they were growing up, they had to build everything growing up. And then when you move on to the Gen Xers, now this is the generation that came after the baby boomers. Once things were built up, they want to take it a bit easy, right? They want to be a bit more laid back. They don't want to be forever like wartime. And we can see with COVID, look at COVID. Look at the way we are doing wartime medicines. That means rationing out medicines, rationing out food. We don't have toilet paper in Australia. It's very like wartime. But once this period moves away, the Gen Xers were like, why do we need to live like it's a war? Let's live a little. They're the ones who implemented flexibility, living up in life, talking about a work-life balance. But in a lot of the South Asian countries, this is where a lot of strife happened as well. So you did have the Indian-Pakistan war. In Sri Lanka, we had a civil war that went on for 30 years. And this generation, sadly, saw a majority of their life in that civil war. It started in the 1980s, which is when they were born. So a lot of their life had that crisis. And so therefore, even though the West says Gen X was living it up, In Asia, Gen X was still very struggling with trying to deal with having to balance a war, but also having to deal with building a future and building a life as well. And I'll tell you why this is important as we go along. So those are those two generations, the baby boomer and the Gen X, with millennials and Gen Z. Now we know the stereotype, oh, millennials are lazy, millennials are useless, millennials are blah, blah, blah. You need to understand where they're coming from and why they think like that to better understand it. So when you have a millennial in your organization and they're very strong in terms of their opinions, I want you to understand where they're coming from to understand and empathize with them better. So who are millennials and Gen Z? I think fundamentally, the difference between this cohort of generations versus the older ones are technology. So what happened was technology came in at different stages in their life. So with millennials, technology came in when they were in their early childhoods. And so therefore, they looked at technology as a way to, the new drug. It was like, oh, games, oh, internet, oh, connectivity. I can connect with somebody far, far away when they were about, say, 7 or 10 years old. With Gen Z, technology, they were born into technology. So for them, it's like a second or a third arm for them. It's a given right because like water and food and bread, technology was part of their existence. And so therefore their tolerance for organizations that don't adopt it is all the more important. So for them, if you don't have technology in your organization, Gen Z are going to be like, oh. Baby boomers, are they going to lose it? No, because they didn't have it in the early stage of their life. Once technology came into their life, they became globally connected. So they didn't know their neighbor, but they knew somebody far, far away in another country. And they became more social. Now, this is important. We talk about social and assume it's social media, but all the generations are social. There is varying levels of extroversion versus introversion. And generally, people are very social animals. But how we approach our social relationships are different, which we'll talk about in COVID as well. So with the younger generation, the way they approach social is they want to be connected online and offline and with a wider community. With perhaps the older generation, their smaller circuit of friends are much more valuable to them. And that's the difference between the way they approach social. And lastly, they value purpose and social responsibility, really important because obviously this is the boom period babies. So remember, baby boomers struggled with post-war or post-independence. Gen X struggled with a lot of civil wars. So the Sri Lankan War, the Indo-Pakistan War, in Malaysia you had the Indonesian War, and the separation from Singapore, and so on and so forth. And then the millennials and Gen Z, they're slightly more boom babies. So what happened was there was a lot of money printing in the economy, and there was a lot of opening up of the economy as well. All these countries started opening up their economy in the 1960s and 70s. What that meant was there was a lot of prosperity, and so therefore this generation has been the product and beneficiary of some of this prosperity. So now you know what this generation is like. So the baby boomers are very like, oh, we need to work hard because they're post-war. Gen X was like, oh, we want to live, but we can't because we're living under the shadow of baby boomers and also things are not going as planned as yet. Millennials were very laissez-faire. They've got technology and they've got money printing and prosperity in the economy. But they got hit with the GFC in 2008. So they got burnt. They got massively burnt in their early 20s. And then the Gen Z. Now, Gen Zs, these are younger kids, right? They're under 20. They will be your interns in your organization currently. They have seen their parents get burnt in the GFC, but also they're very anxious about working hard because they know that things could possibly go wrong. And when COVID hit, guess how old they are? They're in their 20s. They don't have the work experience. They don't have financial safety nets. And so therefore their challenges are going to be different to say a baby boomer who has a retirement fund. Sometimes they might not have a retirement fund. Most of these countries, South Asia, so Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, they don't even have a social welfare state. So baby boomers have to worry about that as well, that they might not have Medicare or money to provide for Medicare. And that is why this conversation is so important. So why are we talking about this? Why is this important? Because in 2015, the top part, there is an equal balance of the generations. That means in a workforce, you had one older boss, you had one middle-aged boss, you had one younger boss. And so therefore it was a balanced organization. So decision-making was balanced as well. come 2025 or in a few years' time, or even now, we have a higher skew of very younger talent. And that is a problem, because that also means the challenges that an organization would face would be significantly impaired as well. But I just wanted to keep this statistic with you so that you know that we're moving towards an arrangement where there is a much more higher weightage of younger generation versus the older generation, because the older ones are retiring. It's called the silver tsunami. So now for COVID, to bring it back to the COVID conversation, when baby boomers have to retire, COVID hits them and they're thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't retire. But then millennials and Gen Z are saying, you know what, you have to go because we need those jobs. That's the intergenerational conflict that you have in your organization. So we're talking about proportions here, or balance of population. I'd like to know today what proportion we have in this webinar as well. So even though I've said what generation you belong to, the reason why it's gray is because I want you to think about who you think you are. So not necessarily whether you were born in 1980 or you were born in 1956. What do you feel like you ascribe to in the generation? And let's run the poll and see what we have today, so we can steer the conversation to be more relevant to you.
Okay, participants, you will see the poll on your screens. You have 4 options. The question in the poll is, what generation do you belong to? And the 4 options are baby boomers, which born in 1946, 1964, Gen X, born 65 to 79, Gen Y, born 80 to 95, and Gen Z, born 1996 to 2010. About 50% of the participants have already submitted their responses. Just give you a few more seconds, and then we'll display the results. Okay, countdown: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and
Oh, that is very interesting. Very, very interesting. So we've got a millennial party going on here. That's awesome. Okay, so I am going to assume that just for the ease of this conversation, that you are all team leaders, not necessarily even senior management, but millennials now, you'll be surprised to know they're not the kids anymore in organizations, but they are now almost reaching 40 years old. So you'll be seeing all of us relatively in upper middle management and approaching senior management, or maybe the middle of middle management, running teams or several teams or part of a management organization. So that's very, very interesting. We have almost 85% millennials. Thank you, Harun, for running the poll for me. Okay, so let's steer the conversation around how we deal with all the other generations as well then. Okay, so now that we know the composition of this discussion as well, let's look at what employees generally want. And based on our research, we found them to want 5 different things. It revolves around stability, and this stability looks at job security, looks at country stability, looks at pay. And even though the common misconception is, oh, millennials leave jobs every 3 years, they don't want stability. Wrong. The definition of what stability is what differs. For example, even of 3 years, you give so much of your life into it, it's like as if you've stayed in the organization for 30 years. So the definition of stability is slightly different. You need to know that you have your tribe, your community in it, and that's what stability is for a millennial. Versus for a baby boomer, stability means a job for life, go out, go into the factory, clock in, clock out. That's what stability is for a baby boomer. The second one is about structure. So structure is hierarchy around rules, regulations. Now, this is a tough one because millennials are agile, very adaptive versus some of the older generations. They don't like hierarchy. But in Southeast Asia or South Asian cultures or Eastern cultures, the value set around don't stand up to your elders, be respectful, put your head down, be very good manners. Those are the things that tie into how do you then work in an organization that's hierarchical, still want to respect people, but are young and want to get things done. The third aspect is development. Development is very key. And even though you think, the moment you think development, you think, oh, just young people because they need to learn skills. No, development is, and there's this beautiful saying that education should go right up to the end of your grave, which I love that statement because it means learning and development applies to the rest throughout the period of your life. And that is why even an employee, regardless of whichever generation you're from, should have some level of development. And we'll talk about how that changes in light of the COVID-19 crisis. Social is another element. How social do you want to be? How connected do you want to be? Social also means organization's image, purpose, and orientation as well. And lastly, technology. Now, when I say technology, you're thinking like stability. You're thinking, oh, old people don't like technology. They don't like computers. Technology is not only computer. Technology is a calculator, was an abacus, was something else. So how I define technology is the technology at the time that they were used to. So if you had a calculator today, it's very important to somebody from an older generation versus for Gen Z, having TikTok or a smartphone is very important, and understanding that dynamic is very important. So ultimately, to summarize, what do your employees want? Stability, structure, development, social, and technology. Most people roughly want this. It's just how the different generations want different things that it varies accordingly. So do we have any questions up to here about the content that I've had, or can I move on to the next stage? No questions. Okay, beautiful. So let's get to the middle section and then I'll open it up to comments because I'd really like to hear what you have to think as well. Great. So the different generations, how their needs differ and how to support them. With stability, we've already discussed this initially, but it revolves around pay and it revolves around benefits and job security, so to speak. And when you look at this graph, you generally see that all generations want roughly the same thing. They want pay, they want promotion, they want flexibility. But what I like about this graph is it gives you an indication of the priorities based on the generation. So for millennials, because they're not getting paid enough, they really need pay. Sometimes I get consulted by companies and they want to put ping pong balls and, you know, fun greenery in the office. And then when you talk to your millennials, you realize they just want to get paid more. And when you look at Gen X, now this is the older generation, older than millennials, they want promotions, they want leadership opportunities, they want to take it to the next level. And then lastly, baby boomers, when you think what baby boomers want, very rarely think flexibility, but they do. They want flexibility. So on one end of the spectrum, the baby boomers, a very old generation, want flexibility so that they can have time off. And then the Gen Xers are fighting for leadership opportunities that the baby boomers have. So there's a strife, but nobody's talking to each other, which is why looking at the needs on a chart and then allocating based on the generation sometimes help. So give millennials more pay, give Gen Z leadership opportunities, and give baby boomers flexibility. And so therefore you level out or balance your organization. But how is this relevant to COVID-19? Now that was in a perfect scenario, right? With COVID-19, massive disruption, right? People are being laid off. How companies have reacted is because they're freaked out. They've either fired people or they've put people on standing down or furlough. So furlough is where you say, okay, you're on pause. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to fire you, but we're going to keep you on pause for an year. And maybe in a year we'll come back, maybe not. And some people have been told, a lot of people, especially in the developing country like here in Australia, a lot of people have been on contracts or casual work. They've just said, you know what, we're not going to renew our contract, goodbye. No benefits, no taking care of them, nothing. So you have, I think the number was, I think 11 million people unemployed as of yesterday across the world, almost immediately. I think that was a US number, but ultimately mass level unemployment and also mass level standing down or furloughing. So when you look at stability, it's just like it's laughing at us because honestly, there is no stability because everything is unstable and your job security is completely gone, or at least that's fear around it. Now I'm getting to the point here. When you talk to your generations, make sure that you instill confidence around job security. You may COVID is a crisis that's going to affect us in the next 6 months to a year. 6 months maximum, and then you begin to see the loosening of controls, and then you'd see things slowly becoming better. Do you need to kick out everybody in your organization and say, you know what, I don't care? Maybe in the short term, you could possibly say, you know what, we're going through a really tough time. But in the long term, if you say, you know what, get out, get out, get out, how are you going to bring them back later on? They're going to hate you. They're going to not want to work with you again. And this is your talent. This is the talent that you have developed over the years. So schmoozing them, being nice to them, communicating, and instilling confidence in job security is fine. Now that's an oxymoron. When I say job security and COVID, it doesn't work in the same way. You're like, no, but people are getting sad. It's about rhetoric. It's about confidence. It's about saying, yep, 6 months I can't hire you, but in a year I will still remember you and I will call you back. And that's ultimately how you deal with the generations. Particularly with baby boomers. Remember we talked about the silver tsunami before, where they're all trying to retire at the same time, but now they don't want to retire because they know they're going to lose their jobs, and they're also concerned about job security, instill confidence in job security, but also easing them into early retirement. If they were going to retire in 2 years' time, maybe bring it forward, because you know you can open up the jobs for the other generations. But see, it's not like saying, you know what, get out, get out, get out. Provide them opportunities to mentor, because mentoring and all of this provides purpose for them. So when you are saying, you know what, old man, goodbye, but we're not throwing you away, we think you're valuable, you can still mentor our generations and you can be part of a larger ecosystem. See, you're using stability and making them feel important, making them feel stable. With your Gen X, this is the lady in blue. Now they were the ones that were approaching leadership, right? And then this hit, and now suddenly there's a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of they don't know what's going on, blah 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 blah. And also millennials, the guy in green. Now all of this, they were all approaching leadership. We were all as millennials, 86 of us, 86% of us are millennials. So we were all approaching maybe the next opportunity, maybe the next, not necessarily senior partner, but audit lead, so on and so forth. Give us the opportunity to do different things, what I call role mobility. Now in Australia, what's happening is, to prevent people from being unemployed, they're telling them to do jobs that are lower than them. And they're doing it because they need to keep their job. But the whole concept, the culture around what you do defines you needs to change, where you need to understand, or you need to communicate to your employees or your team members, this is temporary. Repeat after me. This is temporary. For the next 6 months, there will be a lot of role mobility. So you might do your friend's job. You might do something that's 2 layers below you. You might do something that's 2 layers higher than you. This is temporary till you get through the process. So role mobility applies to upward integration. If you're lucky, you might get a promotion, or it could mean lower as well. It can also mean lateral. So for example, if you're a human resources person providing only salaries, you might be moved to the learning and development team. If you're audit receivables, you might move to audit payables. That's a lateral move. Or you might need to move to risk or audit. You never know. It could be really interesting. So that is why it is important for you as an organization or as a boss. You need to be able to provide the opportunities to look at people who can move in that way. It's difficult to spot it, but in crises like this, when everything is going to the dumps, start looking creatively to all your people and thinking, oh, this person might actually be good here, even though the CV doesn't say that, even though the story doesn't say that. What I'm trying to say is, look for leaders where they're not visible, where it's not in the pipeline. Look at diamonds in the rough, effectively. People that have the potential to plug the opportunity, but you might have not thought of them before. And that is where even opportunities for millennials, like all of us, 86% as well. Because we might not have got the leadership position before, but we might say, you know what, sir, or boss, or whatever, I might be able to do that. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. And that's what I mean by agile career changes. Make sure that you're thinking smart about trying to get into things that you may not have experience for, but you actually can learn on the go. And that's ultimately how you deal with stability in a COVID-19 crisis. With your Gen Z, these are your very new individuals. They are under 20 or under 25. That's very interesting for them, stability, because they're coming into an organization, but everything's going crazy. And when you're young, just imagine how that would hit your confidence and also hit that fear because they don't have work experience to back them. So even if they get fired, with millennials or Gen Z or baby boomers, you have either 10 years, 20 years, or 50 years, 30 years of work experience. With the Gen Z, they don't have any work experience. So think about that, be empathetic to them, and then build confidence. Tell them, walk them through, when you communicate that to them, walk them through a career pathway. So even if you're a millennial and you take under you to mentor a Gen Z, say, you know what, I've been through this, don't worry, it's temporary, this is the path you will be taking. So even though this 6 months or a year has gone bad, this is the career path you will be taking across your life. And that's what I mean by a detailed career path. So that's how you provide stability in an unstable or an unstable period, right? So do you have any suggestions as well that you would like to add to this section? Or any comments? Or we've got some questions.
Yeah, 2 questions asked by people, and there are 3 hand raises as well. So we can maybe go with the typed in questions first.
Okay, yes, let's do the questions. During this critical situation, most of the corporations are going through termination plans. As an employee of the millennial class, how can we respond to this situation? So if you are being terminated, make sure you still stay friends with your employers. So even though they kicked you out, be very nice to them today, tomorrow, day after, weeks, 6 months down the road. Because when business opens up again, they will suddenly look at this. So say you think, okay, think about this. You had 10 contracts, right? COVID came, and then all the contracts went to 0. All your organization fired everybody. When we look past the COVID crisis and then business gets back to usual, they might start getting contracts back, maybe up to 5 or 6 contracts. They still need to hire for that. They still need staff for that. And that is why if you have been terminated, make sure you're still in good favor with your bosses so that when you apply for the job, they still remember you. And as usual, companies always prefer to hire the people that they know than hire people that they don't know because they know your idiosyncrasies. If you have not been terminated and you have to still work for like 2 or 3 roles, because what happens is when you terminate people, the people that remain have to work harder. Just survive. Just make sure, again, remember that lateral role mobility is very important. I hope that answers your question. The second question is, COVID is an extreme global reality. So why is it relevant in transforming conflict between generations? Example, Gen Z and Gen Y. Why is it relevant in transforming conflict? Oh, why is it relevant in transforming conflict between the generations? I think what happens is there is always a certain level of work paradigms and dynamic between the generations. It's just whenever things go wrong, people's true desires or people's natural tendencies come out even more because of the shrinking of resources. So look at the diversity conversation. The whole rights around women, or the whole rights around disabled people, or even climate change. We were talking about it because it was a boom period, because it was a very successful time in our lives. Now COVID came, are we talking about environment anymore? I don't remember any conversation lately. Do we talk about women's rights? No. Why? Because when resources are limited, suddenly everybody forgets all the nice things and they're like, oh, I want the bread, I want the rice. Everybody's fighting for themselves. Self-interest becomes more dominant. And that's the answer to your question. So when COVID becomes an extreme global reality, it heightens the generational or individual wars between each other. And I hope I answered your question. So comments. Shall we take maybe 2 comments? And the comments are, I want you to add to this. What do you think we could do to enhance stability in the generations?
I hope you believe you want people to speak up. So anybody who wants to respond may raise their hands and we'll unmute their mics. If you wanted to speak, you can raise your hand. The 3 hand raises, maybe we should try and see if they want to speak up. So the first person I'm going to unmute is Muhammad Abdul Rahat Sardar. Abdul Rahat, I'm going to unmute you. No, I think he's lowered his hand. The next one is Tahira Iram. Tyra, are you ready to speak up? I'm going to unmute you. Here we go. Tyra, can you hear us? I guess not. We move on to the third individual, and Mohammed Zazmul Haq. Mohammed Zazmul Haq. We're going to unmute you if you have something to say, and you're unmuted now. No. Ali, you want to say something? Unmuted. I guess no. I think there are many people who have raised their hands. Please only raise hands if you want to speak up. We're going to try one more. Server Ahmed. Server, if you want to speak up, I'm going to unmute you. Okay, you're unmuted. Speak up now. Server Ahmed. No, I guess Mariam, we can continue.
Yep.
People may just type in their responses or comments in the questions dialog box.
Okay. I think we do have a comment from Ali saying he believes he's muted. We'll take you up the next time, Ali, then. And please keep your questions and comments, and I will get back to you later, Ali. Okay, so the next stage is structure. So we talked about structure in terms of flexibility. So in terms of number one, hierarchy. So the different generations approach hierarchy differently. Some generations consider hierarchy as a way to understand how businesses are structured and perhaps have better information flow, so on and so forth. But flexibility is something that most generations across the board agree with. And while we think stability is roughly around time or place, so it's about, oh, can I go home early, or can I drop my kids at school in the morning and come back, that's flexibility of time. Another common thing around flexibility is flexibility of space or location. That means, can I work from home? Now, what has COVID made us do? COVID has made everybody work from home. And even though organizations have been resistant to flexibility of space or location, COVID has forced that upon people to then embrace that as a given factor. But when you talk about flexibility in general, most people think it's only those two things, time and location. Flexibility actually is part of a much larger, much broader scope around flexibility of role. So again, I spoke about role mobility. Can you do the same role or a similar role within your organization? So accounts payable person can still want to do work in accounts receivable, so on and so forth, upward and downward lateral movements. What's flexibility of recruitment? This is also that flexibility around some, specifically also the millennial generation, prefer to have the ability to have flexibility of recruitment. So some people prefer to work on the gig platform. Some people don't prefer to work on the gig platform. Some people prefer 2 part-time jobs versus a full-time job. And the way we used to work before, the 9 to 5, one job for one life, was part of the industrial revolution, where everything was automated, and that was rather everything was part of an assembly line. It was a manufacturing oriented industry where you had to come in, clock out the rest of your life to make a product. We've moved away from the industrial revolution, and now we're part of the fourth industrial revolution, where it's part of IT and technology, so on and so forth, which is why flexibility of recruitment has helped, where you could be working 6 different companies in different gig structures. And that's what flexibility means for different people. So based on the generation, they look at flexibility based on what's interested or important in their stage in their life. So if it is a mom who's recently had a child, she perhaps want to work from home, versus somebody who is wanting to work for 6 different clients because they want to perhaps have Friday nights off, so on and so forth. And we did talk about the gig economy as well. The gig or open talent economy is where a lot of the younger generation prefer to have it because it provides more money and provides flexibility of the time that they work. So this is a new and emerging trend, which in COVID-19, let's look at how it impacts us. So when you talk about structure in an organization, so the hierarchical structure, flexibility, and the gig economy, how does that work with COVID? COVID is the biggest factor that has happened is it's made us work from home. when you force somebody to work from home, remember when we used to talk about in organizations and organizations couldn't trust people? They're like, oh, okay, we might let you work from home, but we don't trust you to do the work. What COVID has done is by forcing people, they do it, but they're not exactly ready for it. They're not immune to it, or they don't have the systems and structures in place. So when you deal with the generations, for example, the baby boomers, you need to be able to provide training and support to help them through the work from home. And I'm not talking about the technology behind it. I'm talking about the cultural mindset shift, walking them through it, communicating to them around balancing that relationship. Because for them, they might feel that if they don't see their employees, they can't trust that they're working. And so therefore, communicating trust and authenticity in the fact that the work will be delivered will be effective to them. How do you do that? Number one, you talk to them about it, but also you show them that with these work from home collaborative tools, you can actually monitor performance and make sure that deliverables are done. So effectively, there is a bit more easing or communicating to them to know that you're easing them into that change of structure, because they're very regimented in the way they approach business. With your Gen X, they were, or they have been for a long time, pushing for flexibility. Provide the tools for them, because they would be able to then use those tools to be more effective in the way they approach structure. Provide opportunities for gig economy. So now we had a question before as well around retrenchment, around what happens if you have to retrench your staff or you'd fire them. You could provide, you as an organization, even though you're firing them, you could help them get employed elsewhere by providing them the tools and training to sit on the gig platform. What that means is, even though you can't hire them, you might be able to give them contracts. So you could subcontract to them, or you could tell all your similar companies along the value chain that this person is available and therefore to draw in her skills. So facilitate the gig platform, facilitate that employee to be taken care of during this short period. The same thing applies to millennials as well. So source talents. So millennials are quite familiar with the gig platform. They're quite familiar with knowing different gig platforms, and they're quite used to also servicing their needs based on Uber and so on and so forth. So on one hand, facilitate them to sit on the gig, but also rehire them back and make sure that you build the gig platform. And also flexibility. The biggest impediment has always been trust. What you need to do across the generations is build trust within the system that deliverables will be managed accordingly, and everybody else just works comfortably as well. So provide the tools, build trust, and communicate the cultural change. That's the three top things. With your Gen Z, these are the yellow ones. They're entering a workforce that has been significantly changed. There is no pathway anymore. Structures are changing, but they also don't value hierarchy, because for them, it's about just get things done, let's do it, they're energized, they're young, they're ready for business. So remind them that even though layers have been removed, that they can slowly build themselves up within the gaps in organization, and help them build in those layers as well. So if you look at a hierarchy as well, if this layer is gone, this layer is gone, this layer is gone, they're worried they won't be able to climb linearly. Help them leapfrog that triangle. That's effectively what structure is around. So I'm going to go into some questions around this section. If you have any questions, do shout them out as well. So do you have any questions related to structure? And then we'll get to all of the other questions at the end of the session. Do you want to shoot me out any questions regarding structure and the COVID strategies? Or any comments as well, if you want to drop in a comment to further enhance this section.
Should we give them a few seconds to type in their questions? Or otherwise, somebody wants to speak up, please raise hands.
Yep. Or anything that you'd like to add to structure in the COVID strategy.
Mariam, there are 3 questions about generation and the current COVID crisis, but you think you could take them in the end? Not about the
Which one?
structure. They're flagged right now, so the 3 red flags. There is one question from Wakarul Hassan. If you want, I can read them out for you.
What we can do is, if we'll take them at the end, Harun, because
Okay,
I
all
want
right.
structure here.
Sure, all right.
How do you communicate structure changes across the group? Oh, that's interesting. How do you communicate structure changes? Very good question, Suranga. How do you communicate structural changes? You use the grapevine, so the existing formal grapevine. You communicate that, but you also decentralize your communication. So it has to come, for one thing, you have to play 2 sides of the angle, right? So you need to use a top-down approach where it comes from leadership, because leadership is the ultimate power in the organization. It's seen as the beacon. So the way psychologically you think about it, your reference powers are always at the leadership. So leadership has to communicate that effectively, transparently, and we'll get to that at the end. Being transparent about the way and why you're making those changes and being honest about those changes have to come from the top. Talk about the changes the organization is going through and why that structure is changing, and then feed that information down the grapevine, where ultimately everybody's taking care of their immediate team. So when you decentralize information, it comes off as legitimate. So right at the top, transparency and honesty. Right at the bottom, it's about legitimacy. So if a CEO tells me structure is going to change and it's a huge organization, say it's a 2,000 to 10,000 person organization, I'm going to be like, if I'm a small person, like a small man, I'm going to be like, I feel disassociated with the CEO because I'm so far away from that person. That is why decentralizing the information flow. And if my boss comes to me and says, look, structure has changed, these are the reasons why, this is the company information on the website, but this is hand on heart, I'm holding your hand, I'm telling you this is what's going on. That creates legitimacy and care, empathy. The CEO can very rarely be empathetic to a very large organization, but when you decentralize that, it helps. If it's a small organization, the CEO will play a much more larger role in rallying people around and embedding confidence and trust within the system. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Yep. Harun, are you going to take it as answered, or shall I? I don't.
Yes,
So
I take it as answered. Yes.
Okay.
There
Beautiful.
are 2 more comments.
Okay.
There's one from Fussy Hashmi. I haven't read it yet. Maybe you could have a look. And there is one from Michelle.
Okay. Which is interesting. Okay. It reveals the anxiety. Hello, Mariam. My question is, businesses are closed. Is that the one, Harun? Or the next
one
one?
after.
Okay. How can we? Oh yes. How can we tackle if second to CEO something? How can we tackle if second to CEO order something which already approved by CEO?
Not very clear.
How can we tackle? Could you clarify that question?
Type it again. Yeah, type the question again. I think it's not very clear.
So Said Hashmi, could you retype your question again, and then I'll take it up in the next. Oh, tackle a different order. You could possibly tackle a different order in the way you approach your communication. But the problem is this: leadership is fundamentally important. If it is even the company or the country that you're looking at, leadership is fundamentally important to have general guidelines or direction in terms of the way the organization is going. So yes, the CEO doesn't have to say it. You just need to have general consensus. So what I mean by consensus is you need to have the top layers of the organization understand what they're going through, and then ultimately who ultimately communicates it can be anybody else who, what I would call reference powers, which are people who are influencers within your organization. And when I mean influencers, I don't mean Kim Kardashian. I mean people that people look up to. So your CEO might be a very private person or might not be charismatic, but your influence in your organization could be this maverick person who is the brand manager, or could even be a small manager somewhere who people like a lot. These are your what we call idea champions or advocates. They are your influencers. They are the mouthpieces of the organization that you need to tap into, that because people already like them and they look at them with trust and authenticity. So when I meant CEO, I actually meant it has to come from the top, yes, but the ultimate delivery has to be people, from a person that people will honestly trust and believe. Yep, great. Let's move on from stage. Yes. Oh, thank you. Beautiful. So yeah, so influencers are very important. Use the right people to spread that message is ultimately very important. Okay, so the third stage is development. As you know, development is around skill development. We keep harping and harping and harping about it. That is why we're having this session, because it is a CPD event, because all of you want to become better. But are we studying the wrong things? Are we wasting our time, or should we learn everything there is in the world? This is a very interesting survey that I use quite often. The one on the left side is what millennials or these generations think are essential skills, and the one on the right is what organizations offer as support. Now, the reason why I like this is because it tells me what skills are important, right? It tells me what skills are important, but more so for me as an accountant, I like to see the discrepancy or the gaps, because then I know if I'm doing right or if I'm doing too much in that space. To give you an example, when you look at the black area around cybersecurity, cybersecurity is a very important aspect, 27%, but organizations are already preparing them for cybersecurity at 25%. So if I was a learning and development person, I'd look at that and think, okay, maybe we're overdoing that, but I want you to look at the middle triangle. Resilience. Resilience is important at 28%, but we're only training people for it for 22%. There's a big gap. And again, in the left side of the calendar, interpersonal skills. It's important at 46%, but we're only training at 25%. Stay with me. Number one, the gaps are huge. We're not training them enough for this. But it's even more important now because of COVID-19. COVID-19 came, and look at resilience. Are we prepared? No, we're not prepared. So therefore, fundamentally, what I'm trying to tell you is look at the gap, look at skills that are popular, number one. Look at the gaps or the deficiency or the discrepancy in the way we train people. And number three, this is the COVID-related thing, train for COVID-related skills, short-term skills. So now you have all these skills, we have all these million webinars, we have all these million learning and training providers. Is it important to learn something completely totally unrelated? What I'm trying to say is, in light of COVID crisis, make sure your learning and development is short-term focus initially and then long-term focus thereafter. So in the next 6 months, you should be learning skills that will help you in the COVID-19 crisis, like resilience, like mental health, like role mobility skills. So learning skills that will help you service a different role. If it is another accounting tech software that is very hot in that other role, you can learn that as well. But then once you do that short-term COVID-19 related crisis learning and development, then slowly broaden out your learning and development wider. And that's the difference between dealing with the generations. So fundamentally, when you look at it, what are the differences between the generations? So now you know, number one, look at the in-demand skills, look at the discrepancies, know that COVID is creating shorter-term skill deficiencies. Now, when you look at the generations, different generations have different skill sets. If you look at baby boomers, they're very popular with cost effectiveness. They're very popular with executive presence because they've been at the top for so long. Gen Z are good with problem solving, are good with adaptability, are good with relationship building because they've been middle management for a long time. And millennials are good with tech savviness, with collaboration and adaptability. Where am I going with this? We now know with this chart, some generations lack some things that are important for COVID. Baby boomers lack technology skills. Millennials lack relationship building. They lack problem solving skills. And Gen X, the ones that could actually step up to the plate for leadership, lack executive presence. They lack tech savviness. So what I'm trying to tell you is, when you look at these generations, you know what to train when. When is important. So will I train my Gen Zs quickly in leadership? Yes. Will I train my baby boomers quickly in technology solutions like work from home? Yes. So on and so forth. And that is why it's so important to look at the skills required in the time it is required based on the generation and then train them up. So will I train millennials on technology? Maybe if they require that, but I might actually spend more time training them on cost effectiveness or relationship building, because now I'm going to move my millennials up to middle management. That's how you look at a general development plan. In a good time, you train them for everything. In a bad time or a crisis time, you train different generations, different skills for different requirements. That's what this section is about. And I've explained that here. So provide relevant skills for deficiency training for short-term and long-term. Also cross-disciplinary or lateral skills. And that's why I love ACCA, because when you talk about ACCA accountants, some of them are cost accountants, some of them are financial accountants, some of them are HR people, some of them are CEOs, management. We have cross-disciplinary advantages. So train them to be able to service different roles, because when things go wrong, you can then take on different leadership or different role opportunities. With your Gen Z, these are the young guys, upskill. So now we were talking about the deficiencies, right? With the younger guys, they're coming in and they don't have any skills. So make sure you upskill them faster in the skills that are required. So if you're doing an accounting software, don't start teaching them all the older accounting software. Or if you're talking about coding, don't teach them all the old code language. Teach them the current ones that you're using currently today. But when you looked at the US, there was an article in the US paper around how a lot of the systems are developed on COBOL, which is a very, very old coding language. So if the systems are based on COBOL, would I train a young person in the most hottest technology or coding? No, because what's now needed is COBOL. So do a quick refresher course for him to learn the old coding, because that's what's required in the next 6 months. That effectively summarizes that analogy, right? Good. Do we have any quick questions in this related to development?
Not development specific, but we can give them 10 seconds to type them in if there are any comments or questions. Otherwise, once again, raise hands if you want to speak. Mariam, I think there are no development related questions at the moment. There are others that we'll address in the end.
Okay, great, lovely. Great. So the next stage is social. So now when you think of social, you think, okay, in a COVID crisis, we're all isolated, we're not getting social connections. Social in an organization is much larger than that. It's about business continuity. It's about social purpose. So a lot of the generations look at organizations as beacons for the way society is run. To give you an example, a lot is around image and purpose. So when you look at your millennial generation, we don't work for organizations that are bad organizations, that have done something bad. We want to work for organizations that have purpose, or at least walks the talk and are transparent and honest. Depending on the different categories, sometimes you want to prioritize climate change, sometimes you want to prioritize human rights. And that is, this is a good definition of Gen Z and how they prioritize it. So their priorities based on opportunities for family, human rights, building communities, so on and so forth. But generally, people look at organizations and only want to work with good organizations, good image, good purpose, good brand, so on and so forth. And in light of the COVID crisis, one thing that organizations don't think of, or even you, if you are a manager, is you're in firefighter mode, right? You're trying to put out the fires, you're trying to fire as many people, you're trying to survive. When you're in survival mode, you sometimes make decisions that you might not be proud of, and that could affect your company brand later. So when you fire people, it's also the way you fire people. If you say, you know what, everybody go, or you don't pay them without telling them you're going to pay them, without walking them through why you cannot pay them, would hurt your brand. So it's always important to be mindful about building your brand and maintaining that make sure that you carry them and carry your brand through that crisis and be as transparent and socially responsible as possible. Because when you fire people, it looks bad from a social responsibility point of view. But if you are to communicate that, saying, look, this is completely unfortunate and we are trying to work at bringing you back, you could come off as a more socially responsible organization. So how do you have strategies around social? With your baby boomers, see, the thing is this, when you isolate somebody, the connectivity happens from a social or online world, right? So you would assume generations that have more access or more comfortable, so I'm talking about the level of comfortability to technology solutions, would not be as isolated as somebody who is not. To give you an example, and I'm generalizing here, you have to excuse me, millennials are more comfortable with Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, not Twitter, Facebook. Gen Z, the babies, the younger generation are very used to TikTok or Snapchat. They're more comfortable with being socially connected. So even if you isolate them at home, they can still talk to people. But your baby boomers, your older generation, they're very face-to-face, the way they do business, the way they prefer meetings, they prefer calls versus emails, so on and so forth. So supporting them through this crisis is even more important. You need to make sure that you enable them with the right tools, but do regular check-ins and checkups with them. So you might not need to do so much with the millennial. So for example, your language will change. Your medium in which you communicate will change. That's what I'm saying. The tools are the same, right? You're all using digital online tools. The medium that you connect with them will be different. So for a millennial, you can probably send them an SMS or on instant message on Facebook chat or Slack. Hey, are you okay? Are you cool? With a baby boomer, you might have to take some more time, give a call, as opposed to a short message. That's how the different generations, even though social and you all face the same problems of isolation, it varies across the different generations. So with the baby boomers, you might have to do more regular check-ins, talk the walk, but more importantly, again, I come back to cultural shift. They're used to coming to work, having a face-to-face meeting and discussing things properly. So what you need to do is handhold them a bit more, saying, are you okay? This is the way life is now, but you're okay. We still have your back. With your Gen X, that's the lady in blue, allow for matrix teams. So what happens is, previously, because of the hierarchy, this person had only this team, this person had only this team. Allow for more blending of matrix teams, because now the challenges are business survivability. So empower. The problem with organizations is they prevent that empowerment. They're like, oh, this is my team. You cannot take my team. Allow the structures and also cultural mindset change, where it's not disloyal if you work for somebody else's team, just because you're all working towards the burning platform that is the COVID-19 crisis. So allow for matrix structures, and usually it's not even the systems that prevent it. It's usually a mindset. It's a culture. It's like, oh, you're working for that team. Oh. That's usually why. Politics. This is office politics. So when you communicate, say, look, office politics is out the door. Let's just get this done. And obviously, social for the younger generation, like millennials or Gen Z, be transparent and open about your decisions. Now, remember, when you fire people, even if you need to, it's still going to look bad. So this is very, very critical that you're very transparent about your actions. You're honest. Whenever you even let go of somebody, communicate those actions properly. Give them a plan in terms of what you're going to do 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months, a year. And also bring in management buy-in in terms of what I mean is ownership of the conversation. So open up, have a town hall and say, what are your thoughts? What do you think? When you have a town hall of discussions, even though it's comments, what you're actually doing is you're empowering people to feel heard, to feel listened to feel that they are part of that decision. So even if you have to let go of employees, if everybody was part of the conversation, they feel like they were part of that decision. It's very similar to this CEO from Activision. Activision is a really big gaming company, and I play a lot of games, so I'm really excited about it. He gave his personal number to 10,000 employees. And when you think about that, it's a very large organization. He gave his personal number saying, you know, call me anytime. He may get calls, he may not get calls. But what is important here is rhetoric. It's about, I am here for you, not all of you, but you. And most importantly, ultimately, when you do that, very rarely people do call because they know to respect you as well and respect your time. But that is a really good example of using social media to create access and remove barriers. And I think I've touched on that as well. Around accessibility is very important. So social means, number one, we were talking about brand image, but we also talking about social isolation, but access. So now it's reverse psychology as well. So even though my door is closed, I can't go out, you can't come in, there's no physical access, I'm creating a mental access, a digital access to me as a CEO, as a leader, or even you. So you have a team, you need to say, my door is open. You say that all the time, right? My door is open, my door is open, my door is open. Actually mean it and do check-ins and also talk them through being transparent about your decision making. Because ultimately, when things like this happen, you always see people's friends getting kept in the organization, or somebody's wife is kept, somebody's friend is kept. You should never allow things like this to happen in a COVID-19 or any crisis at all. Be very transparent and be very objective. Isn't that one of our ethics? ACCA's ethics. I love ACCA's ethics because I'm a big fan of ethics. I also teach ethics, obviously. One fundamental covenant is objectivity. So I don't really even need to tell you this because you know this. Be objective and transparent about your decision making, accessible, objective, transparent, and a cultural shift. Communicate that cultural shift in terms of that social image and social access to people. And that's that stage. Do we have any questions on social?
Questions, anyone?
Or comment? I am sorry, I am running a little over time. If you have to go, please go. Harun did say that the recording is available, but if you do want to stay, we're all more than happy to have you.
Yes, Mariam really thought that people would like to speak up during the session, but seems that they're probably in the comfort of their homes. They're enjoying the session more than they like to talk.
So it could be the internet as well, Harun, because yesterday I was watching ACCA President's delivery on the research around COVID and sound went off at the end. It was quite a shame, but yeah. Could be technology, yes, because all of us are overloading the network now, and forever there's dropouts now. It's incredible.
Yeah, there's a comment, and I think we should address that. Michelle is saying they've all been set on mute, and yes, that's right. The software automatically puts everyone on mute. But if you want to speak up, just raise your hand, and I will be more than happy to unmute you. Sure. So if you want to speak up, just raise your hand, as in on the system. Otherwise, I can.
Yeah, Michelle, very valid comment, but usually what happens is we mute everybody, and this is for normal general video conferencing as well, because the ambient noise disrupts when there's about 200 people on this chat, and then there's 400 expected. A lot of the ambient noise disrupts the conversation. So what we do is we unmute, but if Harun sees somebody putting their hand up, he unmutes them, and then we can possibly hear you. So if anybody wants to comment, put your hand up, and then we'll unmute you. Do we have any comments? No, we don't. Totally understand. Thanks, Michelle. You're awesome. Good. So let's get to the last stage, and then we can get through some of these questions that we have coming through the session. Speaking of technology and muting and unmuting and all of this, I'm supposed to be a millennial, but I am also very tech unsavvy. Other than obviously games, I do take some time to understand something, but once I do, it's game on. So that's a critical example of why stereotyping is bad. So sometimes you might look at me thinking, oh, she's young, she knows how to troubleshoot a website or something, or code a line of code. I don't know how to do that. That is why different generations, even though we assume certain ones have different adoption of technology, it could vary based on your individual, which comes to the technology section. To run you through some of the technology that we've seen in the last few days itself is things like video conferencing. So even though we've seen Zoom and we used to do a bit of video conferencing, it has brought everything to the fore now. So everybody now has to know how to video conference. Everybody needs to know how to be careful when their video is on, because we've seen some really nice, interesting videos now of people in their underwear walking around, not knowing that they're being recorded, and just general online working. So there's a lot of work around collaborative working tools. What that means is your Google Suite or your Slack tools or your Microsoft Workplace, but also this whole concept about bring your own device, BYO. Now, this was a concept before COVID, where a lot of the younger generation wanted to bring their own laptop because their files were on it, their pictures were on it, or in my case, my games are on it. But organizations that had security policies struggled with that conversation because they couldn't understand why. But with COVID, that has completely negated all that conversation, because now you're working from home in your own house with your own devices. New considerations come on board, like insurance. If I bump my toe or if my laptop gets water spilled, it's the company laptop or my laptop with me doing company work on it. Who should pay for insurance? Who should provide maintenance? Who should pay for my electricity bills? Those are new considerations that will be coming on board. Connectivity. So connectivity, who pays for internet? Because some countries, connectivity is actually quite costly as well. And also work around cybersecurity, because we all know with the Internet of Things, you're only as safe as your most vulnerable device. So if you have your network system in your organization, it's relatively safe because you make sure everybody's standard. But when you look at different people in different houses, there could be vulnerabilities within people's own individual houses that hackers could infiltrate. Things like micro-learning as well. So now we're beginning also to see generations. Based on the generations, we saw the Gen Xers really are big fans of learning and development programs. They implemented online delivery of learning and development programs. So these are the generation before millennials. They're okay with it. They're comfortable with it. But Gen Z and millennials prefer to learn on the go. They prefer their phone. So for them, they're looking at mobile first ELMSs or micro learning. So they don't want to spend, and I do learning and development, right? I do a lot of training in my own company. When I deal with a lot of the baby boomers, they want 1 day to 3 day seminars. 1 day to 3 days. That's how long their attention span is. With Gen Xers, they want like a lunch and learn. They want to go in quick, come out quick. That also happens at the C level as well. So maybe 1 hour up to 3 hours webinar sessions. Millennials prefer online learning, also webinars shorter span. With Gen Z, they're like, why do I even need to spend an hour or even 5 minutes? I want to just have a game that's teaching me something, or a small 5-minute or 15-minute exercise that I can do that I learn something on the go. And that's what you call micro-learning, much more faster engaged learning. And that's the difference between the generations. So in light of COVID, when everything was going wrong, and remember development, where we're training people for skills that are only related to COVID in the short term, and then broadening that out for a longer term, make sure that also the tool in which you teach them is accurate for the generations. So I know that because I'm getting requests now from other organizations. When it's baby boomers, even in the middle of all of this, they still want to do a 1-day webinar. And I'm thinking, webinars are usually 1 hour to 1.5 hours. That's maximum a person's learning attention span, but they still want an hour, a full day, 8 hours. So we're breaking that. The solution is we're breaking an 8-hour program into 4 to 6 webinars and delivering it over a week. So you take the generational idiosyncrasies. So you know a baby boomer wants a longer time to study. You're taking that behavior, but then customizing that to your COVID crisis. So I can't go face to face and present to them. I'm going to break it into 4 to 6 webinars of 1 hour each. And also the style of collaboration. So Gen Z and millennials like to engage a lot. So I'll ask more questions, I'll interact, so on and so forth. With baby boomers, I'll let them talk, I'll listen, and I'll give feedback. The way you deliver things will change. The way you use technology will differ based on your generations. And something called organizational network analysis, ONA. This is a social media tool. This is a HR tech tool that enables you to see who's talking to who. This is valuable insight. If your organization has it, this is really good so that you'll be able to understand silos. Because when people are isolated and they're not talking to each other, you can then think, okay, so say Ahmed's team was speaking to 5 people, Sarah's team was speaking to 20 people, Susanta's team was speaking to 5 people. Because of isolation and COVID, sometimes they're not talking to each other. That could create isolation and sadness and mental health. So using your technology tools, you can then force them to start speaking to each other and do that whole check-in. Remember we spoke about check-in in social before? Make sure that you do that check-in as well based on the generations. Yeah, so ultimately the how we deal with the generations are relatively the same. Support the technology adoption, but handhold them through it because different people have different varying levels of skill sets that they have. Provide opportunities for them to teach people in the organization. So now we assume just because it's an old baby boomer, maybe he doesn't know technology, wrong, and maybe he can teach people. This applies to also Gen Z. Remember, Gen Z were very worried. They don't have experience, they don't have jobs, they don't have anything, they think they don't have anything to offer, but they do. They might be able to teach people around how to use social media tools. They might have, what I'm trying to say is, tap into untapped potential within your organization based on your generations, and therefore have cross-generational pairing, cross-generational learning. What am I doing here? I'm reducing the isolation. I'm creating more social engagement. I'm creating development. And also I'm breaking down the structures and I'm creating stability when there is no stability. And that's effectively how you deal with these generations. So quickly to run you through the action blocks and then we'll open up to questions. Fundamentally, all of what I've been speaking about comes down to these simple 6 things. Very simple. Number 1, instill confidence. That's all you can do at this moment. You can't make radical changes in your organization. You can't save the world. All you can do is take care of the people within your organization. And I mean grassroots level, right? I don't mean, oh, my CEO is not taking care of me. Oh. We all have responsibilities to take care of our own immediate team. And when I mean immediate team, I don't mean I'm not a boss, I don't have to take care of people. No, take care of your fellow co-workers, your space, your paradigm, your silo or your stratosphere. Instill confidence within your own stratosphere. So your immediate 5 or 10 people, instill confidence. Number 2, clear planning, guidance, and directions. The least you can do is the most you can do is have a plan. So when things are going bad, it's difficult to get plans right, but just have a general direction of where you're going. So say, okay, in the next 3 weeks, things are going to go bad, fine. Plan that in as well and say, look, we're going to go through a rough patch. Have clear plans, objective plans. Remember, we're ACC accountants, and then be transparent and honest about it. Be very transparent. I cannot hire you now, but I will hire you in 6 months or a year. And then clearly communicate that. So when I mean communicate, I don't mean blah, 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 blah. Use the right channels and the right medium and the right language. So when you talk to a baby boomer, emails or phone calls, long emails and phone calls. When you talk to a Gen Z or a millennial, use instant messaging or use social media channels, so on and so forth. So the medium in which they use is different. So when I was talking to a marketing company, they were doing a higher education company in Australia, they were advertising for Gen Z on Twitter. And I'm like, very rarely do you get Gen Zs, the 20 years old, on Twitter. That's more of a boomer / Gen X network. But if you advertise on Snapchat, it's more effective. And in the language, don't write like a 50-page memo and then put it in Snapchat. It ain't gonna work. That's what I mean by communication. Medium, mode, language. So the jargon you use as well. And then last, and also be accessible to all. Remember the CEO who gave his number to 10,000 people. You need to come off as being accessible to your people, to your generations, because with baby boomers, they might have some challenges. With millennials, they might have issues around about stability, about career progression. With Gen X, they're worried about, can I get leadership opportunities? I want that leadership opportunity, but I'm scared to ask because you're not making it accessible for me to put my hand up and say, I want that role. I think I can do it. Open door policy, but even more open now. And lastly, learning and training for relevant skills that are COVID related short term and then broaden it out to long term. So maybe even teach an old COBOL skill if that's hot now, and then later on teach him Python or C++, 6 or whatever is hot right now thereafter. So survive this short-term crisis, build for medium-term, and then broaden for long-term. And that's ultimately how you deal with the generations. Right. Great. Do we have any questions, comments as we have come to the end of our session?
We have Michelle still raising her hand, so can we put her on unmute? Let's see if she has to ask a question. Michelle, here you go. You're unmuted. Speak up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Hi, Mariam. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really nice listening to you. And I don't have a question. It's very much more of a comment to say that this has been a very exciting session and great takeaways. I really love the part about you're talking about job stability, the communication, the mode, the styles, and the jargons used, especially when we deal with different pool of people. And I think that is very important as well. So in our organizations, we do have quite a varied group of people. We don't have the baby boomers, but a lot of Gen X's and Gen Y's. And we do see this, COVID or not, we do see that it is very important for us to maintain that form of communication, the transparency, giving people the confidence when we speak to them on different levels and different topics. So yeah, it's very empowering people and so on. So very informative. So I fall into the Gen X based on the year I was born, but I behave like a Gen Y.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite tricky because I'm not so much of a Gen X type of a person. Personality wise, I'm more of Gen Y. So it's funny because I relate more to Gen Y than the X. So things like getting empowerment, getting the confidence to lead a team, and getting that confidence from my leadership team to me to lead my team is actually very useful. And I see that you have highlighted that quite a bit. And thank you so much. It's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for tuning in as well, and lovely comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
So does anybody else want to have comments or questions as well, or even things that they recommend that I don't know, because I'm not an expert in everything in life, and I'm willing to learn from all of you because you have experience leading so many different companies in your own lives. So if you have suggestions as well, do share, because we're all here, all 400 of us here on this webinar are here to learn. And while you're doing that, I'll switch over to some of these questions.
I think Satyajit also wants to speak up. I'm going to unmute Satyajit.
Yes,
And you are unmuted. Here you go.
Hello, this is Shotojit from Bangladesh. Thank you, Mariam. Thank you, Mariam. This is very nice presentation. So your presentation is fine. So actually, I work in your organization. It has a very flat structure and very open environment, and we always welcome the new people, younger people, come with your new ideas. So we think that if in the organization, if we can create such an environment and a democratic culture, so this type of generation-wise the conflict can be managed. This is our general understanding. But your presentation is really useful for us. Actually. Thank you for nice presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your comments as well. And I think you're 100% right in terms of the culture of the organization reduces the generational warfare. And we had a question before around why is COVID causing more generational issues? And I talked about the limitation of resources. But as you said correctly in your organization and your comment, when it is a democracy or the way organizations are welcoming, sometimes you're able to then foster and ride crises effectively together as a team. So thank you for your comment.
Yeah, and also the transparency is very big issue within the organization, in the culture. If you can practice everything very transparently, and your communication is very transparent. So it is really helpful for the people and also for the community also, not because we are for also for the community. So when we communicate to the community, then the transparency should also be up there actually. So thank you for your nice presentation.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for your comment as well.
Oh.
Okay, I'm just gonna hop into some of the questions, Harun, and tell me if somebody wants to talk as well. Yep. Hi, Riza. I have a question to know from you. Usually in an organization, millennials are on the top of the organization, and that ratio on the organization is higher than Gen X. Do you think this is because of a higher ratio of Gen Z demand, and Gen X will be suppressed in the crisis? How should you avoid this? Oh, okay, so it's about the proportion of the organization. The question is around, if millennials are more in an organization and Gen Zs are smaller, is it because of millennials have higher demand and so therefore they're being hired more, and also will Gen Zs be suppressed? So will the demand for Gen Zs go up because they're not relevant or because they're smaller in numbers? I don't think so, because if you go back to my whole development slide around the skills, and I'll quickly jump in if I can get back to that. See, this is your money shot. This is why all the generations are important. And that is why I was worried about, when you look at the proportions of the generations in our organization for decision making, or like, let's just imagine we have 100% millennial organization. We'll be really good with technology, we'll be really good with collaboration, but we'll be really bad with relationships. We'll be bad with cost effectiveness. So every generation has strengths and merits to what they bring to the table. That's why you have a balanced organization. So even when you determine your team, or if you feel afraid if you're a Gen Z, my advice to you, if you're a Gen Z and you feel like you may be trampled out by a millennial, or anybody, it doesn't matter, let's not get into whichever generation, just make sure that you're more vocal about your skills that you bring to the table. One of the things I've always known when I do a lot of my work with Gen Xers is they are really good leaders. They are really good problem solvers and all of that. They're very bad at articulating it, at making noise. So with the other generation, sometimes they're more assertive. They're like, yes, I can do this. Sometimes, you know, those bullshitters in meetings, like, you know, big talkers, and some of the Gen Xers or whoever, I'm not talking about the generation. If you, I don't care what generation you come from, if you feel like somebody else is like, you know, oh, I can, but you can as well, and you're very passive, step out there, say that you can do it, and be articulate and clear about what skills you can and cannot do. So if you're objective and say, look, I can do these skills, I cannot do these skills, but I can upskill some of these ones, I can fulfill that role, you will find a purpose regardless of what generation you come from. That was a really good question. So will Gen X be stamped out? No, because of this slide, because there is a lot of value they can still give. But you as an individual, if you feel like you're going to get kicked out, step up and say, this is what I can do, this is what I can learn. Sometimes you might have to take a downward step to do a few roles in COVID, as we're seeing in Australia, but it might not be the case in South Asia. Do that, but make sure that you're still visible to the people that matter. That's what's important. I hope I answered your question. That was Ronnie's question. So thanks, Ronnie, for that question. Okay, the next question, I'll answer Rahat Sadia's question. Already SMEs are shrinking businesses and a lot of employees are going to lose their job. What suggestion to them? To organizations, I would say plan short term, but also plan for long term. Make sure that even when you retrench somebody, if you have to retrench somebody, try to put them on pause, but if you have to, make sure that you keep in contact with them, because then when your business does come back at some point, you can draw back that talent and that same working engagement. If you're an employee that has been retrenched, keep in touch, but also reskill yourself. So when you are away, make sure that you reskill yourself for the challenges of tomorrow, not today, for the challenges of tomorrow, because then when things get back, you're still very perceptive. And also build your profile, your CV and your LinkedIn, build a brand so that you're visible to the people that matter. Okay, Abdul Kazmi. Hello, Mariam. My question is that as businesses are closed, professionals are unemployed, we cannot work from home for our employee because work is desktop based. I know. The Australian government spends so much money and a lot of the systems are still very stuck at work, so they still have to keep going back to work. Can you guide us the online source of employment so we can work from home during this critical solution? Online source of employment. Are you talking about the gig economy, Kazmi? Because I think while your organization has only desktop, that is possibly your organization's systems, and I might not be able to change it. But one thing I can make a recommendation to all of you is get on gig platforms like freelancer.com or expert360. What I'm trying to say is, I want you to look at what skills you have inside of you, not just as an accountant, but as a person. So like, for example, I may be an accountant, but I might know how to make clay pots. And maybe I make it so much that whenever I make it, my friends ask whether they can buy it from me. So in a COVID-19 crisis, I lose my job as an accountant. I'm trying to get hired as an accountant, but maybe my clay business might be really useful as well. Maybe I can sew. If I am, I'm a HR person, right? But I'm very good at sewing clothes. COVID comes, I lose my job. I might look at maybe I could set up a sewing business or maybe sew masks during the time to keep me occupied. During this period, it's about survival. It's about making sure that you survive during this period. And so therefore, I want you to look inside of you and determine the skills that you have, not just professional skills, but also personal skills to ride that through the process. Once you've determined that skill, look for gig platforms that can do that. So for professional services like accounting, there are a lot of gig platforms like Expert360 or freelancer.com or something, Expert360. I'm writing it in the comments. Freelancer.com, Gershon, Lehman. These are all professional services gig platforms. But if you're thinking like you're going to do a sewing machine business or maybe something else, look at other gig platforms as well. And that's what my answer to your question is. That was Abbas Kazmi's question. What else do we have? Okay, we'll answer Satyajit Taha's question. If organization has a flat structure, create an open and democratic practice, transparent communication policies, open environment, and less bureaucracy. Always welcome new ideas and new transparent assessment. Do you think still there will be still conflict among the generations? Even in an open culture, there's always going to be some level of conflict regardless, but it's not generational. So when even though I'm talking to you about generation, this is just one aspect of its life. So the conflict could be just because maybe they don't look like me, maybe they don't like me because I don't play cricket, or maybe because I supported Imran Khan versus somebody else. So conflict can come from so many other reasons. So determining the root cause of conflict is what is important. It may not necessarily be generation. In fact, it's very rarely generation. Even though I'm sitting here talking to you about generations, that's usually the last thing. It's just another way for you to look at an issue. But conflict is usually just for conflict's sake. There could be a root cause, which if you speak to Harun, he'll probably organize another webinar around identifying conflict management, which speaks to emotional intelligence down the road. And ACCA does cover a lot of professional competence around that space. Around one of the competences that speak about is emotional intelligence. So knowing where conflict comes from based on your own emotions and your interactions with other people. So yeah, so generations might be the reason, but most often there is a different other cause for conflict, even in an open, transparent organization. So if, for example, open plan officers, right? Everybody was all the rave, open plan, open plan, open plan. We changed all our companies to be open plan. Research is now proving that there is more fights and more isolation happening in open plan because you don't have space to think, you don't have space to be, and you need to listen to music, but it's too open. So some companies are now closing their open plan offices. And so there again, open transparency, so on and so forth, but that was never the crisis. It was maybe the way you dealt with people at the time. And I hope that answers your question. That was Satyajit Saha's question, so thank you for that. As a strategy specialist, how much time do we need? Okay, this is Moinu Islam's question as a strategy consultant. Aha, woohoo! How much time do we need to lead normal economy life before COVID? Oh, that's interesting. Now I've become a COVID specialist. I'm kidding. It depends on how long your country reacts to it. Now COVID is attacking different countries in different stages. So it's a staggered approach, right? So if you were to tell me from China, is it recovering? It's only slowly beginning to come out of the shadows, but only beginning to recover slowly. So it will take some time, but it's only now coming into South Asia. So it's going to take some time before it gets out of it. Ultimately, I'd say everything will be perfect by 18 months. That's based on a lot of the research and some of the specialists that I've been speaking to. 18 months, everything will be back to normal. But it'll still be very, like, we would feel like we've gone through a crisis. You know how it is when you come out of the trenches and it's like a war zone? It's going to be a bit like that in about 6 months to a year. But by 18 months, you should see a full recovery and everything starting to recover. So 6 months is going to be hard for all of us. 6 months is going to be hard. So if you can bunker down, try to survive, get through it, you should be fine. 18 months is a bit too off. That's just a ballpark figure. I'm an accountant, so I'm being prudent. Overall, 6 months would be bad. Up to December would be shaky in some countries because it's only reaching South Asia now, and it's also Australia. It hasn't approached winter yet. So see, the problem is as seasons change, if individual companies don't tackle it properly, it could spread like it is doing now in Indonesia as well. So it's about individual companies containing, but for you, just don't be concerned about the world, just be concerned about your company, your family, your business. So if your company is an export or import facing company, you will get affected. But if your company is maybe a domestic economy, don't worry about it. When you watch the news, all of this, regardless of the question, when you watch the news, there's so much fear mongering that you lose yourself. You start worrying about, oh my God, there's a million cases in America. Oh my God. But you can, because if you don't have US facing plans, if you are not related to the US economy, and if your family is not related to the US economy, don't overload yourself with this is how you get a cognitive overload and you start worrying about it. So worry about the circumstances and your own life and your own pace. If it is client facing or international facing, then yes, you can be worried. But if your company is domestic and your family is domestic related, just worry about the things that you can change. Yep. I'm going to answer Satyajit Shaha's question. How the percentage of competence-based pairing come from any research? Oh, interesting. Competence-based pairing, the percentage. That's very interesting because there is no answer. It's about you looking at it from a situational point of view. Remember I told you about, remember at the beginning I said, if there's a baby boomer in front of you, don't say, Mariam said that he's very cost effective, so therefore he must be cost effective. No, because you can't label stereotypes. So even with competence-based pairing, it is determined on funding. It determines who's in front of you. So if I have a baby boomer who's very tech savvy, who's maybe a tech coder, I don't need to train him in technology. So therefore, an answer I give you is not relevant. And therefore, maybe the baby boomers are really good with tech savvy, and millennials are possibly really good leaders. So look at your situation and then balance out your competence based on your situation at the time. So speak to your generations and ask them and analyze and talk to them properly, and that's fundamentally important. To give you an example, there was this contract I got hired for where they spent so much money to try to understand the millennial generation. And then one thing we realized is talking to the millennials, they said, oh, we don't talk to the other generations, we just have silos. So we just go out for Friday drinks on Friday. This is Australia, by the way. And the other generations go and do their golf club, and then the other generation does that. We don't mix, and so therefore we feel isolated. I'm like, that's it. Like, you spend so much money, just create parties, or when I mean parties, I mean social office gatherings, so that the generations mix. Create mentorship that they can mix. So older generation mentors younger generation mentors older generation. When you do mentorship, what happens is people love to teach, people love to impart knowledge. But what you're also doing is you're making them understand each other and empathize better, because nobody can hate somebody if they like somebody already or they associate with somebody. It usually comes from a misunderstanding. I am also conscious of the time. How do you tell me when to stop?
Okay, we've already, I think, gone over, but just as you finish the content, I think we still have
Okay,
10 minutes.
okay. How many more questions should we do more, Harun? Because I think I have answered quite a bit.
I think there are more comments now, so we can bring it to a natural end. I think just a couple of comments, and we should be okay.
A bit more comments, is it? Okay.
Yeah, 2 comments in the end, I think.
Okay. Thanks a lot for the information. I hope it was good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so to just summarize, what I want to leave you with is fundamentally these last slides, because this is fundamentally important. Ultimately, the generations, it's not the cause of your problem. I know I'm talking myself out of a job because people will be like, oh, why is she telling me this? You're not going to get hired. I don't care if I don't get hired. I'm just trying to tell you that all your problems are not necessarily generations. Generations are just an indication of why people react that way. To quote Michelle, she sits in the Gen X category, but she actually is like a millennial. So if I ever met Michelle, or if I have ever met Michelle in real life, I would think that she was anyway millennial-ish, but I wouldn't care that. I wouldn't put a label saying, oh, she's millennial-ish. I'd just say she's Michelle, because that's all that matters. She's Michelle. It's not that she's like a millennial or she's like a whatever country she comes from, so on and so forth. Labels don't matter. That only strips you up. It helps your brain categorize and understand information as it goes along. That's human processing model. But ultimately, you just look at that lady, Michelle, and then take and love all the beautiful things or the amazing personality that she has, and then try to understand who they are. And that's how you even design your organization as well. You deal with your organization's people in front of you with the same respect and understanding that you can afford to them. Respect their own individual personalities and idiosyncrasies. Once you've identified that, then work with them to create a better, cohesive organization. How do you do that? You instill confidence in them, you walk them through your plan, you be transparent and honest about your feedback. If it is wrong, say it's wrong. If it is right, praise the person. Clear communication, so the right mediums in the right places. So would I send Michelle a 50,000 page memoir or a memo in the organization? No, because based on the way she spoke, she used voice to speak to me. She didn't use chat. That means I know she's a very, very agile voice friend. So I would send her a voice note next time as well. Type of communication. Be accessible and also learning and development all the time. As the famous saying goes, you learn up till your grave. But it's just which learning skill you do is what's relevant at the time. That's ultimately it. Thank you all for staying, listening, commenting, spending so much time. Thank you, Harun, for organizing and being amazing all these long hours. Harun and the ACCA MISA team, that's Ruchira, Nilusha, Harun, and the whole team, they have some 53 webinars in the next 2 months. And that means like a webinar every day. I wouldn't be able to do that. And that's incredible that you do it. Thank you as a panelist, but also as a member, because as a member, the level of CPD that you do in the region is truly commendable. And I think all of you need to be appreciative of them. So thank you, Harun, and Ruchira and Nilusha from Sri Lanka as well.
The pleasure is all ours. Thank you very much. Brilliant session. Excellent. And if you could hear a round of applause, I'm sure all the participants listening to you would be applauding. Okay, fantastic. Just a couple of announcements before we bring the session to an end. People are asking if a recording of the session will be available, and yes, I've responded that soon after the session is over, the platform very quickly starts preparing the recording. And just as the recording is available, all of you will receive an email with the recording link. You can go back and listen to Mariam's excellent session as many times as you want. All right. And number 2, since this is a CPD session, you will all receive certificates in your email in a few days. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Mariam, taking time out and delivering this fantastic session. I hope all of you enjoyed it, and please stay connected for many more sessions like these. Thank you very much, and have a nice weekend. Stay safe at your homes.
Bye, Ruchira.
Bye, everyone. Khuda.
Bye, Harun.